Hi everyone, my name is Duncan, and I don't know about you, but I love beating my family in a competitive game of Monopoly, so let's meet the inventor of it today. Her name is Lizzie McGee, and she was born in Illinois in 1866 to Father James K. McGee, who actually traveled with Abraham Lincoln as a newspaper publisher. He cultivated education into Lizzie's life from a very young age and had her reading all sorts of political commentary and economic theory. McGee was unmarried for most of her life. She was a homeowner and worked as a stenographer and typist in the late 1800s, which was very rare for women back then. She was also extremely creative. She was a poet, she was an actress and performed in dramatic plays, and best of all, she was an inventor. She actually invented an improvement for the typewriter and had it patented back when only 1% of women's patents were granted. So she really paved the way for women inventors all over the nation. So how did we get from an improvement on a typewriter to the board game Monopoly that we know and love today? Well, like I said, her education was cultivated from a very young age, and she absolutely loved economic theory. She actually taught classes outside of her home back after her full-time job in the evenings. And she wanted a way to teach these economic theories in a fun and interactive way. And during this time, board games were also becoming increasingly popular in the nation. So she merged the two ideas and created Monopoly, but back then it was known as the landowner's game. She had it patented in 1904 as well, giving her her second patent. So how does the game work? Well, it's very similar to how Monopoly works nowadays, so you'll see a lot of the similarities, but there are some fun differences too. One of the most notable features, though, was the continuous path that the Monopoly game introduced into the gaming world, because it used to be very linear. There was a start and a finish point, so this continuous path was something that nobody had ever seen before. There were also wages, as we see nowadays. You cross the start line, you get your $100. There was the public park space, which is now known as the free parking space. There's the infamous go to jail space that you land on. There's also property spaces, and she used places in Illinois and New York City for those. But the really interesting part was that there were actually two ways to play this game in order to teach her economic theories properly. So we have the typical Monopoly way that we still play nowadays, where the winner ultimately bankrupts all the other players and ends up with the most amount of money. But she didn't want to teach that those were values to have in your life. So she also made the anti-Monopoly way of playing things, where everybody works as a team and everybody wins when the person with the lowest amount of wealth ends up doubling their wealth by all working together. Now, we have a pretty successful sounding idea, so let's get into those publishing efforts. In 1904, her patent was granted, and then in 1906, she actually founded her own gaming company with her fellow economics-loving friends called the Economic Game Company in New York, and this is when she actually first published the game for people to buy. Then in 1909, she wanted to make some headway to more success, so she went and presented her idea to the Parker brothers, who were the most popular gaming company at the time. They ended up rejecting her idea. They didn't love it. They thought it was too complicated, but remember their name because they do come up a little bit later. Then in the United Kingdom in 1913, there was a company that did like her idea. They ended up giving it a new name and published it. But once it hit the shelves, it didn't see a lot of success. There were a few loyal players, but nothing huge like we've seen nowadays with Monopoly's success. So how did we go from a mildly failed publishing effort to the Monopoly that we know nowadays, where everybody has one at their house? Well, this really came in the post-publishing life. College professors loved this game. So Columbia professors and Wharton professors bought the game to use to teach these hard economic theories to their students. College students then really liked the game, and they actually went home and made their own homemade versions of it and shared it with all of their friends. It then spread like wildfire. These college students went home, shared it with their Quaker families, and then it was very popular in the Quaker community because then they were all making their own handmade versions, having parties, and sharing the idea with people. This is also when things got a little bit complicated with who got the credit for making Monopoly, because a man in the Quaker community had played the game at someone else's house, and he decided that he was going to claim that it was his idea. He took it to the Parker Brothers company that had originally rejected McGee's idea, and they actually ended up buying it. They liked it this time. So things got a little complicated and controversial with who actually made the game, but now in 2025, there's a lot of proof, patents, and news articles that know that McGee was the original creator of it. So rather than focusing on that, I want to pivot and I want to look at all of the creative processes that we have learned in this class that McGee used in order to cultivate her creativity. So we'll start before Monopoly was actually produced. And we've learned that education plays a huge part in how creativity is fostered within children. You know, with standardized tests, things can get a little complicated and students might feel like that they have to be put into a box. But her family never did that to her. Lizzie McGee knew that she could be creative with all of her education, and she was able to merge those two loves. Her family also never got onto her for being a nonconformist or for being independent, back when women weren't really allowed to do so. Her father knew that this would be an asset in her life and instead nurtured her creativity, which led to all of her success. Lastly, she did not let perceptual barriers, what society tells you to think about yourself and your creativity, to stop her. She did not let all of the problems with women's rights stop her in the early 1900s either. She saw them as a way for her to launch herself into success. All right, now during the creative process, obviously we've made our own bug list. We've thought of our annoyances and how to find the solution to them. And this is exactly how she found the solution to people not knowing about economic theories like she wanted them to. She found that bridge and bridged it with a gap, bridged the gap with the game of Monopoly after creating that bug list. She also used her default network, which we know is responsible for imagination. She would come home after her long days of work, sit at her kitchen table, and daydream about new ideas. Lastly, she used goal-directed imagination. She saw the current situation that she was in and the situation that she wanted to be in, and she bridged that gap with the game of Monopoly once again. Lastly, once she made the invention, she relied on community with a zeitgeist, and she created that economic gaming company with all of her economics-loving friends, and they were able to give her some advice on how to better the game, and ultimately she led to greater creativity and imagination. Thank you so much for listening, and here's my Works Cited page. Bye!